So this video is in follow-up to the previous video that I did talking about the one conspiracy theory to rule them all. And I'm calling this one When Alternative Theories Aren't Very Alternative, just because a few things I want to clarify about that video. And if you haven't watched it, then I'll link it around here in the video or below. And basically, a couple people, actually a lot of people were like, "You're really stupid. You're so naive. What you said isn't true." And I'm like, well, for one, you probably didn't even watch the entire video to really get the point of what I'm saying, so I'll clarify it a bit more here. So obviously, I'm not denying that there are powerful people on the planet throughout the entire of human history that sought to gain more power, sought to gain more control, influences, wealth, resources, whatever. Or perhaps they had particular agendas and used tools at their disposal to push them forward. Obviously, I'm not denying that. I never did. I never said that. I never would say that because to me, that's not necessarily a conspiracy theory, and that's not a profound insight in any way, shape, or form. It's just an obvious fact of human history, and it's kind of an obvious fact of human nature. Like if you're in a position of power, you're probably going to want more, or you're probably going to at least want to maintain that. That's just human nature. We don't even need a complicated insight or analysis to understand that. But for some reason, I guess simplifying things in that way and making it more of a human level um, bothers a lot of people, or at least has bothered people over the years when I've made these types of videos. So I just wanted to clarify that point that no, obviously I'm not denying anything. Um, which is why I gave a lot of historical examples in the video that people could look at and research on their own if they were actually genuinely interested in the idea and taking the concepts that I suggested further. It's also a major error, a major logical error to say that if I point out one critique or one thing that's off about a subject, it means the entire subject is off, or that I somehow believe that what I say is true under all circumstances, in all situations, in all realities. To me, that's a big stumbling block. That's a big error, a logical error that a lot of people make, and I think that's one that holds a lot of people back, and I think that's one that causes a lot of miscommunication and misunderstanding in the world. Because I think even when the comments, someone was like, "Oh, I know a guy that contradicts what you said, so what you said isn't true and it's total bullshit, and you must be on drugs and whatever else." I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, there's very few things that are absolutely true all the time. So it's kind of like missing the forest for the tree. Whereas there's another way to look at it, which is to try to understand the larger point that's trying to be pointed at by other examples and ideas. I was trying to come at things from a lot of different angles. It's like, I mean, I could critique water for hours. Does that mean water's bad? No, obviously you need it. I could critique air and breathing, but obviously you need to do it. I mean, I could do a video on the benefits of having acid in your stomach. That doesn't mean you should drink acid and put it in your stomach. So obviously, there's nuances to things. There's a gradation or a gradient of things. But again, this I'm not a logic teacher, so I'm just kind of throwing that out there because it's something that's helped me over the years and something that I think is kind of beneficial. So basically, why alternatives are typically not alternatives. The vast majority of the time, at least what I've seen as someone who studied history and studied conspiracy theories and studied alternative theories and studied alternative paradigms and cults and alternative groups and alternative health stuff and alternative spiritual stuff and whatever, from what I've seen, and quite a lot of it, is that basically it's some combination of a fear-driven us versus them, combined with some variation on the world is going to end, and it's basically always hyping up the next big thing that's going to happen, the next big thing that's going to be revealed. This famous person is going to be brought to justice, or this famous person speaking out about the truth finally, and finally the world's going to wake up to this thing, which that rarely, if ever, happens. At least in the 15 years that I've been in this field, it's rarely ever happened, which is part of the reason why I arrived at these perspectives anyways, of just over time observing people's success rate. Meaning if I follow someone for 2 years and they hype up 15 things that are going to happen, if none of them do, then I can kind of conclude that maybe what that person's saying isn't particularly that useful or true, or at least what they're pulling from might not be the most reliable sources. So it's not really worth me getting caught up in because it's just not true. So it's not useful. It's not adding anything to my life. It's not making me more competent or effective in the world. It's not making me feel any better. So what's really the point? Because I think, just as an aside, it's a really weird lifestyle choice to just continually consume things that make you feel terrible. Like, people will look at, especially people into these kinds of theories, they'll talk about this with food, like, oh, the food's polluted and the environment's polluted and the evil people are doing all these things, which of course might be true, but that doesn't mean you can't access things that are good. And my point is, within food or something, they're like, oh, why would you eat garbage food that makes you feel terrible? It's like, well, why would you consume garbage information all the time that just ramps up your stress response and makes you feel terrible, or gives you like a kind of a false sense of feeling superior to other people, which is basically, I think, really one of the reasons why people get into it, because basically these alternative things are driven by the same clickbait appeal to the absolute lowest aspects of our psychology or neurology or whatever. So it's ironic to me that so many people would glorify this and feel superior and feel more developed because of their alternative theory, which in reality is actually the same mechanisms as the thing they're supposed to be an alternative to. Meaning an overly simplistic fear-based paradigm that gives people a sense of superiority and feels like they have access to some inner knowledge or some secret knowledge or some special knowledge, which usually comes from an authority figure. Which, does that sound familiar? Does that sound like basically everything that generally people like this are against? Was in actuality quite similar. Especially, it's just stimulating people's fear and sense of superiority all the time. That's kind of that's the sense that I get whenever I watch mainstream news or anything like that. I'm like, oh, it's just some clickbait fear thing and stimulating people's emotional base desires to feel morally superior to some other group, or to feel like, oh, we can blame everything on this group, whether it's Democrat versus the Republican, some gender thing, or the elites versus the rest of us. It's really a variation on the same theme. So that's why it's actually not really an alternative, because it's just doing the same exact thing. And really, it just comes down to people feel a deep sense of injustice and they really run on a lot of fear, which is just getting exploited. And there are ways out of that. There are ways to change your functioning and change the way you view the world and the way you function in the world, so that those things actually can't really be exploited for you anymore. Or if people are trying to do it, you actually see it for what it is and it has no effect on you. It's kind of like, for a lot of people, eating sugar or not eating sugar is like a big deal. It's like a stressful thing. They have to do it or not do it, and it's like a whole thing. But there's also simple things that you can do to where sugar has like no effect on you. It's just another thing. You can have it or you can't, but there's no emotional interface with it whatsoever in any way, shape, or form. You eat it, it doesn't give you this overwhelming reward chemical, and you don't have it and you don't feel a sense of loss. As you basically get off of that hormonal roller coaster, that chemical, uh, almost like kind of a bipolar sort of thing where you're just swinging all around. But I think I just say that as an example because it's a very apt and appropriate analogy for the media cycle, for the news cycle, for political cycle, and for the exact paradigms and mechanisms that I'm talking about here in terms of alternative theories. So again, I just wanted to clarify some of those points and take things a bit further. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's helpful. Again, it's kind of also things I've been saying for years, but just seem to be more and more appropriate, which is kind of funny. I mean, I can remember predictions and things that I made 2012, which more or less come true. Um, so again, it just kind of comes back to kind of seeing things a little more for what they are. And like, for example, if you it's nothing. It's nothing a brag or anything special about me. It's just basic mechanics. Like if you plant a lemon seed, you're gonna get a lemon tree. Walnuts, walnut tree. Apples, apple tree, or whatever. Like it's pretty straightforward. It's not really a complicated or anything beyond the basic logic. So, anyways, hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully that's helpful. I'm sure there's going to be an onslaught of angry comments again, just like the last video. Actually, maybe not. People probably won't even watch it or even make it that far, which is fine. For the two people that make it this far, Appreciate that, but also for me, it's just enjoyable to clarify ideas. And yep, hope you're doing well. I'll talk to you soon.